All right. Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Real Talk Coaching Podcast. I am Coach Sharon and myself with Coach Terri and Coach Tara are your hosts. And we are a community. Real Talk Coaching Podcast is a community of change makers where we navigate uncertainty, rediscover purpose, and boldly answer the question, what's next? Together with you, we are more than a conversation. We are a movement helping all to reimagine life beyond titles, systems, and expectations. You see, it's been a while since we've been on, so bear with us. We approach these conversations through a coaching lens, meaning our goal isn't to provide any answers to any questions that you might have or even that we have for each other. It's really to help us explore new perspectives and possibilities. So today, what we're doing is we're opening up our living room conversations to start a three-part series on our own personal pivots. We want to look at the reality of how our own paths have deviated after the federal disruptions of 2025. So now I'm going to turn it over to Coach Tara.
So starting today, we're going to talk about the reality of life after disruption. Coach Terri, you've been in the thick of this. Set the stage for us. Where are you on your journey right now, and what does the daily reality for you look like?
Okay, well, like many others, I had to make a decision as to whether or not I was going to leave the federal government, either by taking the buyout or waiting to be removed because my program was actually going to be removed. And so I took the buyout. And so that was last year, that was April of last year. And it kind of coincided with my daughter and my son-in-law having to go back into the office. And so I spent last summer actually with my grandkids. And I was glad that it happened the way that it did, since we all live so close. I feel like that was by design. And so I did that. And while I was doing that, I was thinking about what my future would look like. And, I had earned my ICF coaching credential. I've always been passionate about coaching. It comes so naturally to me because I truly believe that people need to feel heard. They need to feel like they have their moment where it is really all about them and how they strategize and really think about what it is that they want out of life. And so the most organic course for me was to create my own coaching business, just to get it started. I did not know where it would go. I just wanted to have the business infrastructure there. And in the meantime, I was really just taking a break and trying to figure out what my next move was other than just building that business. And remember, that's also when we all started talking about how we wanted to help people who were in the same situation as we were. Those of us who stayed, those of us who retired earlier than they planned, and those of us who were basically pushed out of the workforce. And so that's when this podcast came to be. And then I created a podcast that was initially designed for Black women like me who were pushed out of the federal workforce last year, but I don't know where that one is going right now. And so I've paused that for the moment. And then suddenly last summer was over and the kids were back in school, and my daughter, had decided to stay home with the littlest one. And so, now it was like, okay, so what do I do now? I found myself trying to join organizations that ultimately weren't, or organizations that were designed to help people who were networking, specifically Black people or people of color. And I just felt like I was in fifth wheel, third wheel territory. I didn't feel like I fit anywhere in those spaces. And in the meantime, um, the nest egg that I had, the savings that I had, everything was starting to run out. So what I did was I paid a year in advance on a lot of things. My a lot of my subscriptions. I just paid a year ahead so that I wouldn't have to worry about that. And then I guess it was really in December when I started to get a little anxious, and I had, looked at my resume because I figured I wanted some type of bridge between going into my own business and paying my bills, right? And so I started to look at my resume. I started to figure out, okay, who are you? What is it that you do? What is it that you want to do? And I have been working on that resume for like the last 7 months, but it started to get to a point where I was feeling pressured to find something. Um, and there was just nothing out there. And so, I had talked on my other podcast about support systems and how important they are. We've talked about it on this podcast, support systems and how important they are. I found myself not reaching out the way I encouraged others to reach out because there was something going on inside of me. There was a barrier to reaching out to people. And so thankfully, my mother and, my stepdad recognized that that's what that was. And they've been my greatest champion through all of this. Now, mind you, yes, I had a nest egg like everyone else. I invested a little bit in my business and, the framework for getting myself on track with that, the framework for adding a little bit more skills to my resume, to my repertoire. And yet I did not really take the plunge and go out there and um, look with strategic precision as to what I wanted to do, as to what was being offered. I kind of started to get a little bit desperate because I knew that the money was going to run down to the point where I would be in some type of turmoil. And so thankfully, again, my parents came to my mom and stepdad, and then my dad and my stepmom, but mostly my mom and my stepdad have been extremely generous to the point where, I just feel for anyone who does not have that, because that is what has kept me afloat. So, long story short, I, started putting feelers out there, put my resume out there, and I, I've been able I was hired basically working for a state government entity. And unfortunately, I'm in a place right now where it's a lot for a little. And yet I am grateful because I would love to know where the 300 and some odd plus thousand women, where they are right now. I'll get into that a little bit later. But what I will say is I've found the thing that will bridge the gap between me building my coaching business as well as being able to pay my bills. But there's a lot to both of those components that I think people really need to understand the reality of.
Coach Terri, as you talk about your transition and the things that have, that you've been thinking about and going through, um, I'm thinking about identity. There's a lot of identity associated with work at times. What you do, how you show up. And it becomes part of who we are, especially when you are in a job for a number of years or in a particular industry for a number of years. It becomes who you are, it becomes part of your identity. And so when we think about that, how have you been holding on to your identity as a professional coach and a business owner at a time when you're just trying to survive?
So, coaching is me, right? The one thing that I know to be true, that I know for a fact, is that I've always been a coach. I've always been that person. And so there is that component um that isn't going away just because I'm having a financial issue that wasn't even due to something that I did, right? But one thing I will tell you is I've been in a position where I've been laid off before. I was working for the private sector. It was 2008, and I was in home building at that time. And everybody knows what happened. And you know that it was a business decision, and you know that it wasn't just you, it was a bunch of people. This time was different because this time it was not a business decision. This time it was purposefully directed towards certain people in our industry. And there is something very painful about that. You're always going to bounce back. Life can be cyclical, right? You have your ups and downs. You have times where the economy is great, times where it's not so great. And that's why we always encourage people, continue to learn, continue to grow, continue to build your skills because you just don't know. This impacted my being, right? Who am I? Not just who am I in this country? Who am I as as a human being? Who am I as a person who's built an entire life and it could be gone just that fast over other people's issues with me? That's a different feeling. It is a different way of existing. And I don't think that people really understand the impact of what that does to someone. And so I recently had to ask myself, who am I? Right? Who am I as a person what has brought me here and what is keeping me from um this, okay, well, this didn't work out, so let's go do this thing over there. And I think it is because it was a shock to my system as a person that this is how this all came about. And um there's a bit of humiliation in that I didn't think that I had internalized, but I did. A bit of, you are not good enough, a bit of, you are not worthy enough to continue to be a public servant, to continue to grow. It doesn't matter how many, like, I have it, I'm educated, I'm experienced, all the things. And yet, that does not matter because I do not matter. And it's not that I do not matter as an employee, I do not matter as a human being who is equal to people who are making these decisions. And that can mess with your head. And so I had to go back to the basics of, well, who am I? Who am I? Who have I been? Not just in my personal life, but in my professional life. And I've always been a problem solver, right? I always see a problem and I always want to fix it. I always see a problem and I always want to wonder, why is this happening? Why does it keep happening? How can we resolve this problem so that it doesn't happen anymore? And I've always been that, whether it's been in the private sector or the public sector. When there's a system that doesn't seem to work for the people who are the end users, I'm the one who's like, why isn't this working? And why do we keep doing it if it's not working, right? I had to go back to those basics. Like, who am I? And that's why I say I've always been a coach, because that's pretty much what coaches do. We help people figure out what is wrong, why is it wrong, why do we keep doing this thing that we know is wrong, and what will we do in order to resolve that so that it doesn't keep happening. And so that's the journey that I've been on. Honestly, now that I'm in a stable, position, it's been all about, who are you now, Terri? And who do you want to be? And why is it that you don't even trust in yourself? Trust yourself to know who you are. Why do you even have to ask yourself, after all these years working, after raising children and purchasing homes in different places and getting awards and getting bonuses and encouraging other people and supporting other people? Like, why are you suddenly asking yourself as if you don't know who you are? And it's because of that humiliation aspect. That humiliation, and I say humiliation and not humility, on purpose, because I know that all my blessings, come from faith and belief and prayer and love and all the good things. And I'm humble enough to say those things. The humiliation is what gets me, because I've done nothing wrong, right? Why am I humiliated? So why do I feel embarrassed? Why do I feel like I can't let people know that what happened to us is wrong? That I can't let people know that what has happened to us is just a different chapter in the same story? And so that is what I think held me back for so many months after this happened. And if it held me back, I know that there are people out there who feel the same way.
Terri, if I can, I want to ask one follow-up question because you kept mentioning, the who am I? And so if you were coaching a client that wanted to come in and start exploring who they are, what would be a question that you would ask them?
I would say, who do you think you are? Who have you shown yourself to be? Uh, what do you think your purpose is? What has been your purpose? What have been your accomplishments? What have been your strengths? Who could you point to and say, I know that person would say this and that about me? Um, how do you feel when you go to sleep at night, right? Do you feel like you've accomplished something? Do you feel like you've done your best for the day? Like, who are you when you look in the mirror? Would you want to talk to you if you saw yourself on the bus? Those types of things.
Wow, that's interesting. Would you want to talk to yourself if you saw yourself on the bus?
Yeah, I like me. Yeah, I'm always smiling, so I'm very approachable. So I would definitely want to talk to me. I would sit right beside me and be like, "Hey, girl, what's up?"
Well, that's good to know. That is good to know. I want to thank you for your transparency about your experience and having to, um, rely on your parents when, that's a hard thing to do at any age of adulthood, where you have to go back to your parents and ask for help, or may not even ask when they see the need, and then being humble enough to say yes, not letting that pride take over, and just saying yes, I do need and I appreciate all of the help that you're getting. So I want to thank you for sharing that.
Thank
And and we know that there are many of our listeners who are in the same or similar situation as you have been, who are in that same holding pattern as you are, have been going through this, working twice as hard for a fraction of what they used to make, and working within the gap between the vision and the reality, being not quite where they want to be, but not quite where they used to be, and just being in that, I'll call messy middle of everything. So you've been open about how things have been going with you so far. What's that dynamic like for you?
I will say that the one thing that my family keeps saying, and it's not just me, because remember, it also impacted my daughter and my son-in-law. And so I would say that my mother um keeps saying, we will get through this together, right? That it is what it is. We have to do what we have to do. And so, in a way, she is kind of like right now my chief financial officer. And so, I did not think that at this age I'd have to explain my expenses to the same person who used to whoop my butt, but here we are. But I really don't. She's really been fantastic. My stepdad, I mean, they've been, like I say, I can't imagine not having these people. I can't imagine those who are doing this without that, because it's very hard. And then it still trickles down, because my daughter and son-in-law, it's like we're all, and then not even just them, but, family member or two who may have been caught up in the situation. They weren't necessarily in the government, but they worked for the government, right? They contractors, and there's just, everyone is affected. There are people, neighbors, around here who were impacted by this. And so that's really when community matters, family matters. And I will say that I was the first to champion that and tell family, look, just like me, my family came to me. Um, and it's, and I know that there are a lot of us who are like, no, I can do this on my own, or I don't want to bother you, or you don't. I know that because I am that person. And so even in the other podcast, I was like, family, it's up to your friends. It's up to you all to go to these women, especially Black women, because we're not going to tell you what's going on. We're not going to tell you what's going on. We will make everything seem like it's okay until we finally just can't do that anymore. And it is up to family and friends and the people who love these women to do that. And it's not about pride. It's again that feeling, I wouldn't say shame, but that feeling that, we've been treated as if we did something wrong and we didn't. And there's a little bit of that we hold on to, even though we shouldn't, even though we know we shouldn't. And so we don't want to bother anybody with our problems. But, at some point, a family has to step in and say, yeah, well, no, we got you, girl, because you are not coming to us. And we know that you can't magically be okay. You have to step up as family, and that's what my family did.
That's beautiful. That is because everyone doesn't have that support. Everyone
Mm.
doesn't have family or friends or people that they can rely on, and um and so that's a beautiful thing. And even when they may have family and friends, again, they may like pride get in the way because, as we mentioned before, with Black women, we try to do everything ourselves. We wear that cape of imposter syndrome and things like that, and it holds us back from getting to the things that we desire. I'm not gonna say need because we get the things that we need, but really what we desire in life. And so I want to go back a little bit with you and discuss about the financial support that you have been mentioning, being able to, get the help from your parents. And some people have to rely on the state, or their children or other forms of fashion to get financial support. And understand that it doesn't diminish the emotional pain of the struggle, right? You still have that um, those those emotions that's going on within you. And then on top of that, we you have what we'll call the buyout trap. Taking the money because, hey, I took the money too. I was like, oh, y'all paying? I'm gone. And I'm going. But it's also where, yeah, we're going to give you this money. And we know that after taxes, even before taxes, it really wasn't a whole lot, really. But you take it, and then there's that, wait a minute, if you take this money, then you have to make sure you cannot come back to the federal government as a federal employee or any direct services where, like, you could get a contract with the federal government. You can't do any of those things for 5 years from the time that you separated. How has that been for you in this big scheme of things over the past year?
At first, I was pretty resentful. I will say I was pretty resentful that it could happen and could happen so easily, and for all the reasons that that anybody with, eyeballs and two brain cells can figure out. Um, and I because I love being a public servant, right? And especially, where we work, where your mission is to help people and, to help the citizens, help the people around you with information that they may not have. And I'm very, very, very good at giving people information that they may not have, right? Because I want you to have all the information to make decisions that keep you and your family safe. I want to support those people who do that, right? And that has been the trajectory of my entire career. Different ways of doing it, but all the same. At the end of the day, I want to help you to make make decisions based on all the information that you have, whether it's about yourself, whether it's about, what's going on in your environment, whatever is going on. Whether it's about a product or a service, that is the core of who I am as a person. It is in my DNA, right? And so I felt at first that was taken away from me because it wasn't just about finishing out my career in the public sector, and growing professionally. Of course, it was that too. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's the whole purpose of being a productive member of society, is to get better and better where you are, right? To eventually move up or move over, to eventually to make more money. There isn't a person on this planet who's like, I'll get paid the same exact thing for the next 30 years without a problem. No, that's just not how life works. But it's the honor in helping people. That is the foundation of my faith, right? And so it felt like people were purposely taking that away from me. And I was really annoyed and resentful of how that whole thing happened, with, the callousness of it. But I also felt a little free. And the reason that I say that is, anybody working for the federal government can tell you all those regulations. I'm a bit of a rebel, right? And so when I first started going into the federal government, it's like, oh, compliance, this, compliance, that, regulation, regulation, regulation. Do it this way. Oh, don't get caught up in the Anti-Deficiency Act, so all those things. It's just like, oh Lord, if you move too far to the left, to the right, to the front, to the back, you might get yourself in trouble. And so you spend half of your career trying to keep you and your team from, breaking any of these regulations or going against any of these compliance orders or whatever. So in a way, being out of the federal government, which is so bureaucratic with so much red tape, is like, okay, that's a little bit more freeing for someone who's like kind of pushes against the grain every now and again. But now you couldn't pay me to go back. I believe now that I don't want to hold on to what could have been. I'm never going to recapture what was there already, what I had, or everything that could have happened had things not gone sideways. And so one of the things that I know that I am capable of doing, because again, it is ingrained in our DNA through our ancestors, and that is resilience. And that is, don't look back. Just keep moving forward. And I feel like that's what God is telling me. Nah, you did that, been there, done that. Now you're out of it. Whatever happened, happened. You got to experience your feelings. You're still going through a lot of it, but keep moving forward, child, because there's nothing for you back there.
Belief. Yes, yes. So, you know, when we're exhausted from demanding jobs that pay less, our energy is completely drained. It's easy for our inner critic to take over and shout that we aren't enough or we're not doing enough. We're not we're not what people think that we really are or who we think we really are. And it's mentally and emotionally and spiritually exhausted to deal with those things within ourselves and then trying to put on that, or not trying to, then putting on that mask of everything is okay. So what's next? Coach Terri?
I'm thinking about, Coach Terri, how do you set boundaries? What do boundaries look like for you right now? As you're, transitioning and building your business, working, how do you set boundaries around financial anxiety? So that it doesn't, excuse me, completely paralyze your creativity, or bleed into your energy that you're bringing to your clients, right? Because you're the person we're sitting next to on the bus because you're smiling, right? So how do you keep that up? What boundaries are you setting around your circumstances to ensure that you stay in a space to grow and reinvent and pivot?
So, it's interesting because the reality is the cost of everything has gone up. And what I paid last year, when I was able to do it, all those things are coming due this year, right? I had anything can happen. Like I had to replace my brakes, and I had to service my water treatment thingy, and these things. Life still comes at you fast, right? You still have to go to the doctor. You still have to buy groceries, stock up on this, that, and the other. Then there's gas. Then there's, oh my gosh, it's somebody's birthday, and then it's you know, things that you wanted to do that you just are not able to do right now. It is not just me. There's a lot of people dealing with that right now. Vacation, oh, you can pretty much forget about it. I just started a new position. And so, as the newbie, first of all, do you even have the leave to go anywhere? Second of all, do you have the money to put in that? My money is best spent surviving right now. My money is best spent doing what I need to do right now. Like Coach Sharon said, I'm going to do what I need to do. I just don't have what I need to do what I want to do right now. And so that is my reality. And it's not just my reality. And that is that in a way it's that weird way that it brings you comfort, not misery loves company, but understanding that there are, for every time I say something like this, there is a person who's experiencing that and they're not able to say it, or they don't think that anybody else is experiencing this. And this is the reality. And I will say this. When I had reached out to another podcast, because they were discussing, people who have to, women, specifically Black women, who were pivoting after so many of us. And when we say so many, hundreds of thousands, people have got to remember that. Hundreds of thousands. And so, I want to get on the podcast. Yeah, tell my story, let people know. And so, I get to meet with this person, an introductory type of thing. And because they didn't know how to, what is the word? They didn't know, like, I guess how they, because I wasn't this positive story in 30 days. I had, this, that, and the other. They didn't know how to, they were going to put my storyline out there. And I'm like, this isn't a storyline. This is my life right now. This is the life of hundreds of thousands of other people right now. And so because you can't put a positive spin on what is really going on, you don't want to do it. And that told me everything that I need to know about anybody opening up their mouths to talk about what Black women are going through right now. It's like, okay. I think that really, it really bothered me. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to speak out here, which I should have done in the first place, but speak out here because this isn't right. And oh my goodness, it's happening to so many people, so many women, and people are silent about it, and they've gone off to the next news story. In the meantime, women are losing their jobs. They can't pay for things for their families. They have kids in school graduating, this past year or next year trying to go to college. They maybe just bought a car. They maybe just bought a house. Like, I just bought a house, y'all. And it's like, this is damaging. This has damaged lives. It has impacted lives in a way that you can't bounce back from it right away. Not everyone. I don't care how many degrees you have. I don't care how many people you've networked with. It's not happening for everyone. Okay? And then I go to network. And if you're not in that elite group, you can pretty much forget about your, the things that every single time that I have gotten anything from anyone, it's been some random person who was like, I remember you when. That is the only, not ever has it ever been in these professional networking places. And I probably should not have said that. But that is how I'm feeling right now. And that has been my experience. And so I pulled back from all that because I invest and get nothing. And I'm just like, when I tell you this is what Black women do, invest, 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 invest in everybody else, support everyone else. Give me your resume. Let me give it to somebody all the time. And then, or you give them great, kudos when someone calls because, they want to hire this person and you're like, yeah. And you say all the good things and they get hired or whatever. And when it's your turn, and so that's what I experienced. That's what I experienced with that podcast person. That's what I experienced with the network and stuff. Pulled back from all that and said, the only person who can really invest in me is me. That's it. And so that's what I've been trying to do. And so I just literally created a career story, the trajectory of my career, and the main themes and threads that have run through that. And I came up with a lot of insights about myself that I didn't even know I had. And one of those was I am a fixer. I am a problem solver. I am I am the one who's like, why aren't these systems working for people? Why are we inconveniencing people or putting extra burdens on people? Whether the system is a computer system, whether the system is how we gather around and do things together, whether the system is a team that's not working, whatever these systems are, personal, professional, that is who I am. And so that actually gave me that confidence back that I really needed, because that is who I am. And regardless of how things happened last year or what happened last year, no one can take that away. No one can diminish my accomplishments in any area I've ever worked in.
Wow. That was a lot. And we always talk about hope on this podcast. And we also refuse to do toxic positivity. So, hope when your bills are due isn't always reality. How has your word for this year, and I said it earlier, belief, helped you during this time?
Yeah, that has been, it's almost like, I said in our last podcast, our last episode, I was like, I wish I had picked a different word, because I'm telling you, when you tell God that you're going to do something, or that, God, belief is my word, and I'm going to believe in you, and I'm going to do, yeah. Yeah, that goes south real fast, because the first time something happens, it's like, why? But I will say that um I've been shown time and time again, like, just when I'm right there, like, I give up, I don't know what else to do, you know something happens, he makes a way, somebody calls, it keeps happening. And right now, even though I am technically vastly underemployed, um the work that I'm doing is actually helping people who are in similar situation. And so I can't, and so every time I think about that, I'm just like, like, I can't believe I'm here, but then I also see that I'm not the only one, but at least I have the ability to help others, the ability to uh, help form a solid foundation in different ways for other people. And so that's where that belief comes from. And so now it's just, another skill I've picked up, another experience that I'm having, a new way of looking at things and looking at people who are in dire situations and really, really need help. And, you know, there are so many who I am working with that are, meeting that call, even though they're overwhelmed.
You know, a deferred dream can make you feel defeated if you're not careful, right? So Coach Terri, looking through your own coaching lens, how do you find genuine, realistic belief right now? What keeps you from letting this current, bridge job, your current situation just be the final chapter?
Like I said, I have been through this before in a completely different way, but um, you don't think you're strong until you have to be. You don't think you're capable until you have to be. And that's why I was always like, God, please don't test me, because I'm gonna fail all them tests. I'm not strong. I'm not capable. Don't even bother with me, Lord. Go do something with somebody else who might. who might prove, no, God doesn't do that. He's like, yeah. So I always, I'm a hopeful person. I'm generally, genuinely optimistic. I'm an idealist. I, so, okay. um, when I was younger and, Fame came out, I honestly thought that if the world would just act like that, if everybody would just dance in the streets and be, dancing on top of the cars and swinging off light poles, the world would be a better place, right? Like, why bring all this misery and terribleness and hate into a world when you can be bringing love and laughter and art and music and dance and dreams and thoughts, all the good stuff. And so that's just a part of who I am now. I'm a Christian, but I'm also a Pisces. So those two fish, when they go in different directions, sometimes, there's that one that wants to pull you down into depression, but then there's that other one that's like, nope, mercy, mercies for another day, blessings for another day. Somebody will come out the woodwork and call me, or I'll get, I just got one of those, how you're on the unclaimed property in the state. Well, I looked my name up and there was some unclaimed property, so that was very helpful. And so it took like 3 months to get it, but there's always something, always beauty. The other day I was, how you don't want to cry, but you kind of feel like you have the tears in the back of your eyes. They haven't fallen out, but it's just one little thing could make the waterworks go. And so I was outside watering the garden. Um, Mortgage is paid, by the way. And I was outside watering the garden, and a beautiful butterfly just happens to come by right as I was like, and so, that's what I said. Mr. Rogers, neighborhood, anybody grew up with him, you know how he said his mom told him when he was watching all the horrible things going on in the news, and he had asked his mom about it, and his mom had told him to look for the helpers, look for the helpers. I am a helper. Not only am I a helper, I have help. I see that butterfly, my mom will call. My little 2-year-old grandbaby will give me a hug or want to come down to see me. My sister will send me care packages, the helpers. That is what is getting me through.
Wow. Well, you know, um, change is inevitable. And when things happen, it kind of changes our perspective and our outlook on how things are. And hope isn't a wish that, that brings things back to how they used to be, especially when we've gone through so much since January of 2025, and still going through things, even as of the recording of this podcast. We know hope is an active, gritty requirement for survival. So, to you, our listeners, I have this question for you to ponder. How do you define hope when forward is the only direction you can walk?
Powerful question.
Very much so. Very much so. It makes me think about something that I used to tell myself, failure is not an option, right? So, things will happen. Roadblocks will come and boulders will knock you off your path, right? But failure is just not the option. Very interested to see how our listeners define hope, when they know they have to move forward, because that is our story. as Black women, we know we have to keep going. Um, this has been great, Coach Terri. You've really, opened up to us, to our audience. You've been very transparent, as Coach Sharon said earlier, about your journey, the things that you've experienced over the last year and a half, 18 months, and we truly appreciate you for that. I think that is also a sign and a prerequisite of a good coach, right? Someone who takes the time to honestly reflect on their own journey, the things that they are going through, and are not stifling it, right? Because how do you help others if you're overly consumed with hiding what is going on in your own space? Seeing you like this, it's really a model for for resilience. And it's exactly what hope looks like in action. Um, Having belief, right? Believing that it's going to work out. You are your creative self, you are your innovative self. Excuse me. And moving forward, right, you will keep that energy. You will keep being the person that we see walking down the street smiling and wanting to engage with. And so I thank you for your openness, and for sharing with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I know that you all are members of my board, my personal board of directors, which I really think everybody should watch if you hadn't seen that episode. It can be really, really helpful to have a team on your side. And I really like what you said about hope, what hope looks like in action, right? Um, and it just reminds me of Abraham in the Bible when it says, against all hope, he believed in hope. Because that's all you got left sometimes, right? That's the thing that will get you through the next day. And so I am thankful that when I wake up in the morning, there's so much still to be grateful for. There's so many people in my life to be grateful for. And I haven't lost any of my skills or my experience. That's something that can't be taken from me. That's all still here. It's just a matter of what it looks like for me moving forward. And so I just want to thank you for being in my corner, this whole time. Um, and being there for people like the rest of us, because we're all going through something, being there for, our listeners, and people even in our own personal lives. You ladies are part of my foundation, and I'm very, very grateful for it. And so now I just want to ask the listeners, when going backwards is completely off the table, how do you find the courage to keep looking forward? You know, if you're relying on a safety net right now, whether it's family or savings or a bridge job like me, you know, how can you allow that to support you without making you feel like a failure? Um, it's funny because Terry, you said failure is not an option. Failure is not an option. Um, and I would say that failure is not the end, right? I don't know. I just, yeah, when you feel like everything you're doing is wrong or it's not providing you with the results that you want, you just go back to the drawing board. I mean, that's all of us all the time. You know, our ancestors taught us that. Our current support systems are still teaching us that God is still sovereign. It doesn't matter what other people are doing, you know. And so to have that hope and be grateful for everything
Mhm.
that I have, which is so much more than, you know, so much more than than I could have right now, right? It's fantastic how much I am that I have. And that's not to diminish those who don't have that support or that bridge job yet. But that's why we wanted people to know, when going backwards is not an option for you, what is the next best option? What do you need in order to keep you going forward, in order to find those helpers, and to also be a helper if you're a supporter of family members right now who are going through this? How can you continue to be a helper? you know um we thank you for listening. I thank you for allowing me to be vulnerable and to tell the truth, because hiding it isn't helping anybody. um it's not helping us figure out how we're going to vote. It's not helping us figure out how we're going to help. It's not figuring out helping us figuring out what type of society we want to have and who we want to be as neighbors, as family members, as coworkers and colleagues and supervisors and politicians and whomever. Hiding this stuff is not going to help anybody. Putting it out there and letting people know you're not alone is the only way that this will work for all of us. So thank you.
And thank you. So, as we prepare to close out this episode, we want you, our listeners, to understand that whether you are navigating a deferred dream or working harder than you ever have before for less than you feel that you're worth, we leave you with this thought, um, a question to ask yourself. What is one tiny way to remind yourself that this job, what you're doing now, wherever space that you are in, what you are doing for yourself is not who you are forever, but who you are at this moment. And as always, we want to make sure that you keep coming back. So make sure that you're hitting that like button, subscribe to this podcast. So every time an episode is dropped, you are getting that notification. Share this information with others. Share the link for this episode, as well as the link to our channel with others, so they too can hear the great and amazing information that we're providing. Send us an email and let us know what you've been thinking and how this has been impactful. Or and if you have some different thoughts, let us know that too, because we don't feel that everybody's going to agree with everything that we say. So we want to hear that as well. So make sure that you're reaching out to us at info@realtalkcoaching.net. That's info@realtalkcoaching.net. And, let us know what you're thinking, as well as book that introductory coaching call and let us know, which coach you might feel that would be best to work with, so we can engage with you and see, how we can be able to help you. You already heard how Terri said that she is a servant helper at heart. So, she might resound with you, or something Coach Tara might have said, or even myself. So make sure you are liking, subscribing, that you're sending us your emails, leaving comments in the chat. I know that we're giving you all a lot to do. We've asked you a lot of questions today and giving you all, but we know that you can get it done. So, as we always say, we want you to keep coming back, and remember that we want you to keep reimagining everything about life. Until next time.
Thank you.